When I reviewed Season 1, I only acknowledged there were 4 main characters and that's it. Blitzo, Moxie, Millie, and Luna. I don't know why, but at the time I didn't register Stolas as a main character. There were obviously other characters in the season, however these were the main characters that the show wanted you to focus on. Each character feels important, each character feels like they have a role, each character feels like they have a purpose. Even if it's not perfectly executed, at least it feels like they have a purpose. Moving on into Season 2, and it's only really Blitzo and Stolas that are important for Season 2 of the 5 main characters. Luna barely appears in Season 2. She barely speaks, she barely appears at all. There's only like 1 episode out of the 12 episodes where she's important to the story. And it feels like such a bizarre thing to do, given how much more present she felt in Season 1. It felt like she was important, she had a purpose, she was there for a reason. And then in Season 2, she more or less downgraded into being a background character, even though she's one of the 5 main characters. Then again, maybe it's for the better that they completely underutilize Luna for this season, because even though I despise Season 2, the only good thing that I will say about it is that it doesn't ruin the only good thing about Helluva Boss. I don't know why I'm complaining about the fact that Luna barely appears in Season 2, because I know that if she was in every single episode, if she had a bigger, more important role, they would screw her character up completely. I just know it. Here's hoping they continue to underutilize her in Season 3. And then Moxie and Millie have a bit more of a purpose. They are a little bit more present in Season 2 compared to Luna, but not by much. They feel like side characters, even though they're part of the main 5 characters of the show. Moxie and Millie each have 2 episodes where it feels like they're important to the show. Moxie has X's and O's, I don't know how the hell you pronounce it, and Unhappy Campers, while Millie also has Unhappy Campers and Ghost Screwers. And that's it. These are the only episodes where these 2 characters are really all that important. 3 of the 5 main characters of the show are completely underutilized and barely really there, barely present in the show when compared to Blitzo and Stolas. I honestly think this is a wasted opportunity because I could see there being chemistry with these 4 characters. I look at both versions of the pilot, the 2019 pilot and the remade version that they made for the show's Amazon Prime Video debut, and then I look at the first proper episode, Murder Family, and I could see these 4 being fun characters. They do have a bit of chemistry, and it's such a shame that this chemistry is barely found in Season 2, you know? It's like, it's almost like they should have stuck to the demon hitman storyline that the show was supposed to be about. What a crazy idea that would be, don't you think? Speaking of which, as it turns out, the demon hitman story is not the only concept in this show that is completely wasted. So starting off, something that Season 2 focuses on a lot is Blitzo's backstory. In the very first episode of the season, The Circus, it's revealed that, indeed, Blitzo worked at a circus when he was a kid, working with someone named Fizzarolli. We'll get back to him in a little bit. Stolas, also as a kid, attends one of these circus performances and takes note of Blitzo's act, being the only one in the crowd that reacts positively to it. This episode establishes that Blitzo and Stolas actually met when they were children, something that is never alluded to at all in the previous episodes, nor is it ever acknowledged again in the subsequent episodes. You can make the argument that like, oh, they were kids here and now they're adults and a lot of things have happened since then and I doubt that they would remember each other. But I don't know, this just kind of feels like bad writing, which, I mean, that's not really surprising because this is Helluva Boss after all. But I feel like if you're going to establish these 2 characters met when they were kids, maybe make that a little bit more important and relevant to the story. Instead of using this lazy cop-out excuse of, oh, they met when they were kids, but that was a long time ago, and so they don't remember each other when they re-meet again as adults. Instead of doing that, you could just have them acknowledge, yeah, they met before when they were kids. Just a few quick throwaway lines, and there you go, this plot hole is fixed. Also, in the first few episodes of the show, Stolas would make all of these explicitly sexual comments towards Blitzo, something that he would stop doing later on as the show progresses, but re-watching these early scenes make them a lot more uncomfortable knowing that these two met when they were kids. I don't know why it makes it more uncomfortable, but it just does. And it reminds me yet again that Stolas would be a lot more interesting as a character. He would be a lot better if he was a villain. This whole romance thing between Blitzo and Stolas would work a lot better, and it would be a lot more interesting if it was portrayed as a bad thing. Anyways, let's move on to Fizzarolli, Blitzo's circus partner. Who appears in, I believe, 2 of the 8 episodes of season 1, and I think in both of them, it's established that there's something wrong between the two of them. The two of them don't like each other very much, and so it makes you wonder, how are these two characters connected? What happened between these two characters that make them not like each other? And then this aforementioned circus episode reveals that Blitzo and Fizzarolli used to work together at the circus. So they used to be on good terms, making you more interested as to what the hell happened between the two. And then we cut to a few episodes later. We have an episode where both Blitzo and Fizzarolli get kidnapped. And throughout the episode, they try to find a way out. And it's in this episode where it's revealed why the two of them can't stand each other. I guess Blitzo was jealous of all of the attention and fame Fizzarolli was getting. Everyone loved Fizzarolli, but no one liked Blitzo except for Stolas. And then the entire circus burns down. I don't remember if it was by accident or if it was deliberate. I don't remember at all. You might think it's unprofessional for me to not remember certain key details about the storyline, but again, this stuff is impossible to take seriously because of the style of humor that this show has. There's no reason for me to take any of this seriously when I know that 2 minutes after this stuff, the show is gonna go back to being haha, it's funny because they say the F word a lot. And so Blitzo's mom ends up dying in the fire. I think they might be brothers, Blitzo and Fizzarolli. Again, this is important stuff that I don't care about. I don't see any reason to pay attention to it. I don't see any reason to really treat it seriously given the style of humor that this show has. Don't get mad at me. Vivian Medrano's the one with the immature sense of humor. And so as a result of this circus burning down and their mother dying, Fizzarolli and Blitzo hate each other. However, while they're escaping this place, the two of them eventually reconcile and now they're on good terms. In the very next episode, they're officially friends again. They establish that these two characters have bad blood against each other. They establish that these two characters hate each other in season 1. As far back as the second, technically third episode of the entire show, Lululand, they establish that these two characters have bad blood against each other. And then they further establish this in a later episode of season 1, Aussies. And then they further establish in the circus that Blitzo and Fizzarolli used to be on good terms, making you question even more what happened between the two that caused them to hate each other. And then in episode 6, Oops, yes, that's the name of the episode. I don't know why it's the name of the episode, it just is. They officially reveal the reason why Blitzo and Fizzarolli have bad blood against each other. and then they immediately make up, and now they're on good terms again. Now they're officially friends. In the next episode, the two of them are buddies again. And all it does is just make me question, what the f is the point of establishing that there's bad blood between these two characters if you're gonna resolve it in the exact same episode that they finally explain what the bad blood between the two is all about? That is not good writing at all. It's already hard enough to take this stuff seriously because of the humor that the show has, but the fact that they reconcile, they eventually make up in the very same episode that all of this is finally explained, and most likely none of this stuff is going to matter in any of the future episodes of the show, in like season 3 or anything like that. It just makes me question, why even include this into the show in the first place? This would work so much better if you finally explain why these two hate each other, and then have the episode end off with them still hating each other. Save the whole thing of them making up and becoming friends again. Save that stuff for much later on. Don't just rush out this conflict and that's it. Don't do that. It is 100% possible to have this episode end with the two of them escaping from where they were kidnapped, and also still having them hate each other. You can have that happen. They escape from the place, and they still hate each other despite that. That's not impossible. You can do that. For whatever reason, they choose not to do that. And so there's even less of a reason to care about any of this than there already is. I understand that there's a long gap between when Fizzarolli first appears in the show and in this episode where they finally explain what happened between him and Blitzo, and also having the two of them reconcile. I understand there's a long gap between the two. I'm sure, like, when they introduced Fizzarolli into the show in Lululand, I doubt they had any ideas as to why Blitzo and Fizzarolli hate each other. But if you're going to establish that these two characters hate each other for a reason, let that reason sit in. Build up to the reason why these two characters hate each other, and then explain why the two characters hate each other, and then have that explanation sit in a little bit, allowing for it to be a lot more interesting, allowing for it to feel more impactful to the episode, to the storyline of the entire show. And then, after enough time has passed, you resolve it. You have the two characters make up and become friends again. You don't immediately have them reconcile in the same episode where you finally explain why they hate each other in the first place. That is awful writing. I'm sorry. Huh? What's that? You want even more potentially interesting concepts and ideas that are either completely wasted or poorly executed? Well, don't worry, because our queen Vivian Medrano has a lot more where that came from. Now, I'm sure we all know what the 7 deadly sins are, and in this show, you have 7 different characters that are all meant to represent each of the 7 deadly sins, which that is also a great idea. This is an idea that has a lot of potential. Of course, because this is Helluva Boss we're talking about, that potential is completely wasted. Now, so far, there's only been 3 of the 7 deadly sins that have had any importance, any relevance to the show's storyline, and so as a result of that, we're only gonna focus on them. I'm sure whenever season 3 comes out, they're going to further expand upon the 4 remaining sins, but for the time being, there's only 3 sins that are important to the show's story, so we're only gonna focus on them. The first sin that we're gonna focus on is Queen Bee. No, I cannot be bothered to pronounce her actual name. And, alright, fine, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. This is a terrible character design. Finally, we're gonna be talking about the character designs for Helluva Boss. Finally, we have reached that point. One of the biggest problems that I had with Hazbin Hotel were the character designs. Not all of the character designs in Hazbin Hotel are bad, mind you. I think like Charlie, for example, I think her design is fine. There's nothing wrong with Charlie's design. However, there are a lot of problems with the other character designs on the show. Number one, there is a very limited color palette across the characters. Almost all of the characters on Hazbin Hotel have the same color palette of red, white, and black, and that's it. It is not very appealing to look at. It is a bit of an eyesore combined with the completely red backgrounds that the show has. I understand that the show takes place in Hell, but that doesn't mean every single location has to be red. Helluva Boss also takes place in Hell, and yeah, there are moments where the backgrounds are just red and that's it, but there's also moments where they're in Hell, but there's other colors besides red. So I have no idea why they were able to do it for Helluva Boss, but not for Hazbin Hotel. To give a tiny bit of credit, it does seem like they're averting this whole thing with Season 2, which appears to have a big focus on Vox, the TV head guy, the only main character on the show who doesn't have red, white, and black as his primary color scheme, thereby making him one of the better character designs on the show by default, even if his design does retain other flaws that the character designs suffer from. But in Season 1, everything is just red, and that's it. As I've previously mentioned, Helluva Boss has a lot more variety in the color scheme. It's not just red, 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 there's a lot of other colors as well besides red. There are certain characters on the show, particularly 3 of the main characters, Blitzo, Moxie, and Millie, that all primarily have red, white, and black as their color scheme. And now that I think about it, if I knew nothing about these 3 characters, if I knew nothing about this show, I would assume that these 3 were siblings. I would assume that these were all related to each other, akin to like the Animaniacs or something like that. There is nothing about these character designs that would convey that no, this character is not related to these characters. There is nothing about these character designs that would convey that they're supposed to be husband and wife instead of brother and sister. But at the very least, there's a lot more variety in the color scheme for the characters in Helluva Boss when compared to in Hazbin Hotel. However, some of the characters on the show suffer from the opposite problem of having way too many colors, and I mean way too many colors. And Queen Bee over here is a perfect example of a character that has way too many colors attached to them, which in all fairness I think could tie into another problem that I have with the Hazbin Hotel character designs that Queen Bee over here shares. I think this design could be saved. I think there is potential for this character design to not be this bad looking. The problem is, once again, it is cluttered with unnecessary details that don't need to be there. Going back to the character designs in Hazbin Hotel, a lot of the characters have a lot of unnecessary details in their designs that they don't need. A majority of the characters on the show wear suits, and these suits have a lot of unnecessary details that don't need to be there. Not only does it make the show look very cluttered and bloated, but also I want to imagine it is a complete nightmare to try and animate these characters given how excessively detailed they are. Less is more. A lot of good character designs are very simplistic in nature. You look at characters like SpongeBob and Pikachu and whatever, and it's like their designs are very simplistic, and that allows for them to be a lot more memorable. And I want to imagine it would be a lot easier to animate these characters because of the very simplistic nature of their designs. Imagine if Sonic was cluttered with unnecessary details that didn't need to be there. Not only would it look absolutely ugly, but it would also be extremely hard to animate for the cartoons. It would be hard to animate, like, I don't know, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic SatAM, Sonic X, that sort of thing. It would be hard to animate because his design would be cluttered with unnecessary details. Again, Charlie is one of the only exceptions to this. Her design is not cluttered with unnecessary details. And yeah, she has the limited color palette that a lot of the other characters on the show suffer from, but she is the main character, so I guess it's okay for her. She gets a pass for it. And going back to Queen Bee's design, this design is unnecessarily cluttered. Honestly, I would argue having having too many colors and an unnecessarily cluttered design is worse than having a limited color palette and an unnecessarily cluttered design. There are far too many details within Queen Bee's character design, and I don't think the design on its own is bad necessarily. Like, if you removed a lot of these details that don't need to be there, this design could be salvageable, but it's the fact that there's so much unnecessary crap on this design that's what completely ruins it. The biggest offender has to be this weird, like, lava lamp tail that she has, where you have all of these different colors, and they're all, like, very, like, gloopy looking, droopy, I don't know, very much akin to what you would see on a lava lamp, and I cannot imagine how insufferable it must be to try and animate this character, to try and animate this lava lamp tail that she has. Get rid of the lava lamp tail, she doesn't need that. There is no reason for her to have this. Also, finally, a lot of the characters on Hazbin Hotel suffer from same face syndrome. A lot of the characters on the show make this eating grin, copy and paste, cookie cutter. And something that I acknowledged when I initially reviewed Helluva Boss Season 1 was these characters don't have that eating grin. There aren't as many characters that make that face. There are a few characters, of course, namely Fizzarolli. Fizzarolli makes this face a lot, but overall, there aren't as many Helluva Boss characters that have this face when compared to Hazbin Hotel characters. None of the main 5 characters have this eating grin face. Thank you for that. Thank you. And Queen Bee is largely exempt from having this eating grin, so it might be redundant for me to bring it up when talking about her, but you know, I just wanted to bring up the 3 main problems that I have with the character designs in both shows. And lo and behold, Queen Bee has 2 of the 3 big flaws that the character designs have. And so overall, I give this character design a D-. Would still smash though, to be honest. Hey, speaking of which, I completely forgot. This character is supposed to be one of the 7 deadly sins. And so now you might be wondering, which sin is she supposed to be representing? I look at this blatant gooner bait furry design, and I think, oh, for sure, she has to represent the sin of lust, for sure. Well, guess what? That's not the case at all. Do you want to know which sin she represents? She represents the sin of gluttony. Yes, gluttony. Now let me ask y'all something. Where's the fucking gluttony in this character design? There is nothing about this character design that screams gluttony. The show does portray her as being a non-stop party girl consuming God knows how much alcohol, and so that's where the gluttony comes from. And yeah, obviously the way that these characters act should mirror the sins that they're supposed to represent. However, their designs as well should also convey the sins that they're supposed to represent as well. And there's nothing about this character design that screams gluttony. If I knew nothing about this show or this character, if the only thing that I knew about this character was that she represented one of the 7 deadly sins, and you asked me which sin did she represent, I would say lust. Because this is very clearly a furry gooner bait character. Why is she not representative of the sin of lust? Where is the gluttony in this character design? If she doesn't represent the sin of lust, then who does? Who represents the sin of lust? Oh, you gotta be f***ing kidding me, man. Are we for real now? Are we for real? Ladies and gentlemen, this is Aussie. This is, without any hyperbole, the worst character design I think I have ever seen in any cartoon ever. I thought that Queen Bee's design was bad, however, it is salvageable. It is mostly bad, but it can be salvaged. This monstrosity, though, is beyond saving. This is a perfect example of what not to do when designing a character. This is the complete antithesis of everything that makes a character design good. It's just, what am I even looking at? What is this supposed to be? I can't even tell at all. It's just a mishmash of random things put together. The anatomy is all f***ed souped up and weird looking. I can't even tell what I'm looking at. It's awful. Why is the top half of the body so big, but then the head is so small? It looks terrible. Jesus, man. This is an incredibly specific niche reference from my childhood, but I remember when I was a kid, I owned Shrek on DVD, and there were a lot of different games that were on the Shrek DVD, and among these was this morph game, this character morph game, where you could create your own Shrek abominations. You could take the body parts for Shrek, Fiona, Donkey, and Lord Farquaad and mix them up together to create your own Shrek monstrosity. And that is exactly what this character design reminds me of. It reminds me of that really old Shrek DVD game where you can mix up the Shrek characters to create abominations. Very specific niche reference, I know, but it's the first thing that I thought of when I saw this character. And it's made even more baffling by the fact that somehow this character is supposed to represent the sin of lust. I don't know how. There is nothing about this character design that screams lust. There is nothing about this character design that screams any of the 7 deadly sins for that matter, but especially not lust. Why is the blatant furry Goonerbait character not representative of the sin of lust? Why is this thing representative of the sin of lust? I don't want to see a single one of y'all say, "Hear me out," because I swear, we will not be hearing you out, okay? We will not be hearing you out. Once again, the only thing that conveys Ozzy is supposed to represent the sin of lust is his personality, the way that he acts. And again, that is important, but I do think the design should also convey that he represents the sin of lust. This is the one time where I would have been okay with fan service. They could have made this like a Tumblr sexy man or whatever, and it would actually somehow be better than what we end up getting here. So Ozzy is in a relationship with, you guessed it, Fizzarolli. And a lot of the times, whenever these two characters are together, Ozzy would make these sexual, lustful, horny comments to Fizzarolli. He's extremely horny and he makes a lot of sex jokes. There you go. That's how you know this character represents the sin of lust. Unfortunately, this doesn't work as well as it should because every single character on this show is horny and makes a lot of sex jokes. There's almost nothing to make this character stand out from the rest of the crowd in that aspect. If this was the only character in the show that was cracking sex jokes and was explicitly horny, then I guess it would be fine. It would be a different story. But no, almost every single character does this. Blitzo does this a lot throughout the show. Stolas makes a lot of sexual jokes throughout the show. He might as well be representative of the sin of lust. What makes Ozzy different? What makes him special? Besides the fact that he somehow has a significantly worse character design than all of the other characters on the show, of course. And finally, we have Mammon over here, who is supposed to represent the sin of greed, and I guess his design is okay, actually. I think he has one of the better designs in the show. For one thing, unlike with Queen Bee and Ozzy, they convey that this character represents the sin of greed, not just with the way he acts, but also with his design, the way he looks physically. See, it's not that hard to do it. However, I feel like Mammon suffers from the opposite problem that Queen Bee and Ozzy have. Instead of being extremely cryptic and vague as to how this character is supposed to represent the sin that they're supposed to be representing, Mammon, I think, it's a little bit too obvious. It's a little bit too on the nose that, yeah, this character represents greed. I feel like the fact that he's green would be a good enough clue that this character represents greed. The cane with the $sign is okay-ish, I guess. Maybe you could keep that. but the little like dollar sign things that are hanging from his hat, there's no reason for them to be there. Now you're just making it too obvious. You're making it too blatant. I mean, in this case, I would much rather have something that's on the nose instead of something that's extremely vague and subtle, but still, there should be a balance. You don't want it to be too obvious, but you don't want it to be too cryptic either. So as it turns out, Fizzarolli works for Mammon. And surprise, surprise, Mammon exploits Fizzarolli for money. Go figure. If I were to describe Mammon's character in terms of his personality, in terms of the way he acts, that sort of thing, he is literally the exact same thing as Adam from Has-Been Hotel. The exact same kind of character. The whole thing with Mammon is he swears a lot, and that's funny because they're swear words. I know that applies to quite literally every character across both shows. However, I get reminded of Adam from Has-Been Hotel more than any other character. For whatever reason, he just reminds me of Adam. In the introduction for the episode that he makes his debut in, he's holding this like concert, I guess, talent show, I don't know what the hell it's supposed to be. And a lot of it is just, it's funny because he says the F word a lot, and that's it. There's one joke in this episode that came very, very, very close to actually being funny. So obviously Mammon's whole thing is he's kind of a douchebag. And so during this opening monologue, he goes on about how women can't be funny and whatever stuff like that. And then in the corner of the screen, it flashes written by Vivian Medrano. And then Mammon's like, anyways, moving on. And the credit immediately disappears. Now, when I first watched this episode, I wasn't really paying attention all that much to this scene. I was, but I wasn't mainly focusing on it. And I saw that for a split second. It kind of caught me off guard, and I was like, holy crap, there's no way. You couldn't make this up, man. I could have sworn when Mammon went on about how women aren't funny, women can't be funny, whatever, and the written by Vivian Medrano stuff comes up, I thought that was unintentional. I thought that, like, holy crap, you know, the complete lack of self-awareness would make it funny. And then I rewind it, and I see that the credit fades in, but it doesn't fade in completely, and then it disappears immediately as soon as Mammon says, anyways, moving on, whatever. And that's when I realize it was intentional. What could have been the only funny moment in Helluva Boss, and it's no longer funny, because it was intentional. And just in case anyone gets the wrong idea, yes, women can be funny. Unfortunately, Vivian Medrano is not funny. And if anything, the fact that this joke was intentional makes this even less funny. It's like Vivian Medrano is self-aware that she's not funny. She's self-aware that she doesn't know what it takes to make a good cartoon, let alone two of them. She's self-aware that her shows have the exact same garbage humor as shows like Big Mouth and Velma and whatever, and yet she gets praise rather than backlash online despite that. She's aware of all of that, and yet she makes no effort to improve at all. It's meant to be like a self-deprecating joke, I guess, but it doesn't work when Vivian Medrano actually is unfunny. Being self-aware that you're not funny doesn't work if you continue to be unfunny. I thought that this was gonna be funny because it seemed like it was unintentional, but the fact that they planned it on purpose, this was a deliberate joke. I mean, you know, I get it would be funny. It would actually be funny. If this was intentional, it would be funny if Vivian Medrano was funny. But unfortunately, she's not. Unfortunately, she thinks excessive swearing and sex jokes are the funniest thing ever. And so she makes sure to include as much of that into her cartoons as possible. But also at the same time, she wants to include super serious dramatic moments in these episodes. She wants these shows to be really funny, raunchy comedies where the characters swear and make a million sex jokes and whatever, but then she also wants these shows to be taken seriously. Make up your mind, Vivian. Make up your mind. You can't have your cake and eat it. Anyways, going back to Mammon's design, I think it's okay, however, it isn't perfect. And another problem that I have with it is the fact that it retains the same sort of like clown jester style as Fizzarolli. I've previously established that Fizzarolli works for Mammon, and Mammon exploits Fizzarolli for money. However, given the fact that both of these characters have this clown jester look to them, I could very easily assume that the two of them are related. I could very easily assume that the two of them are like brothers or something like that. There is nothing about either of these designs that would convey that these are two completely separate characters that are unrelated to each other, besides the fact that one works for the other, of course. Also, the eating grin that Mammon makes does not help matters out at all with that whole thing. Hello there, eating grin. Long time no see. But you know what? At least I can tell which sin he's supposed to be representing. At least I can tell, yeah, he's supposed to represent the sin of greed. I do think they made it a tiny bit too on the nose with the fact that he represents the sin of greed when it comes to his design, but at least they convey it with his design. I don't know why they could do it for Mammon, but they couldn't do it for Queen Bee or especially Ozzy. Maybe it was deliberate for Ozzy, you know? Maybe it was deliberate to have the ugliest character on the show be representative of the sin of lust. Maybe that was the purpose. I don't know. If that ends up being the case, if they deliberately made the character that's supposed to represent the sin of lust also be the ugliest character on the show, then that's actually genius, I'm not gonna lie. All will be forgiven if it turns out that this character is ugly on purpose. Sadly, I doubt that's the case. Now, as I mentioned before, there are only 3 of the 7 deadly sins that are relevant to the show's storyline so far. I'm sure that when season 3 comes around, they'll show off the remaining 4 sins. There is an episode later into the season where you see the sins all together, and there's like an extra sin that's there briefly. However, she doesn't talk, and honestly, I have no clue which one of the remaining sins they're supposed to represent. Knowing Queen Bee and Ozzy, this is probably going to be the sin that I least expect it to be. I don't know, when season 3 of this crap comes out, there's no chance in hell I'm ever gonna watch it. Sorry. Bro, how does SpongeBob, SpongeBob, unironically have a better representation of the 7 deadly sins than Helluva Boss? Unintentionally, I might add. How do you even do that, man? How do you even do that?